It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
On the Happy Families Podcast today, a provocative topic. Should we or should we not be pushing our children to advance with their early talent promotion? Kylie, a study that I want to talk about today, not a doctor's desk study, because this one's...
Is this just semantics? It is a doctor's desk. Let's be real.
Not really. This one just stood out to me, and it strikes me. It's such a provocative topic because it is counter to everything that we do. It's kind of funny. What I'm about to talk about is something that, from a scientific perspective, we have known for some time, and yet in society we continue to ignore it. There's no other way to say it. So I want to talk about accelerating kids in sport, although it could be anything. It could be accelerating kids in whatever you want, based on a recent research meta-analysis that was published by a German sports scientist, Arne Gulich, and his collaborator from Austria, Michael Barth. It's called Effects of Early Talent Promotion on Junior and Senior Performance. It's a systematic review and meta-analysis. And Kylie, I don't want people to fall asleep, because this is at the very... You know when you go to assembly and you see the kids getting the awards, you know how good it feels? This goes to the very heart of that.
I remember when Chanel started school.
So for those who are new, Chanel is our eldest daughter, who's now in her mid-20s. So we're going back 20 years.
She was reading by the time she was 4. She was a really astute, keen learner.
We thought we had a very special...
Not just special, genius. She was up there.
And we were going to get her in modelling agencies, and she was already advanced in her sporting endeavours with netball. I mean, she was just killing it. She was so good.
And I remember having conversation after conversation after conversation with teachers year after year, the acknowledgement that, yes, she was doing extremely well. It just feels so good to know that you've done something right for your kids? Right.
Right. I like that.
Right.
Well, we see them experiencing success, and it's exciting for them, and it's exciting for us. So here's what the compelling scientific evidence shows. It's a new meta-analysis. By the way, this is the fourth meta-analysis in the last couple of years that I've come across that highlights pretty much exactly the same lesson. Like I said, the science has been telling us this for a long time, being completely ignored in practice by parents and by coaches and by those who run what we might call talent promotion programs. Essentially, there's a conflict between short and long-term development. So you've got those kids that streak ahead, as you highlighted. Our eldest daughter was one of those kids who was just miles ahead of the pack. And then you've got those kids that are going slow. It's almost like the hare and the tortoise. And this might sound like we're going to be pumping for mediocrity here. That's not what this is about. Excellence is important. So, like I said, this German and these Austrian sports scientists, it sounds like I'm about to tell a joke, doesn't it? Walk into a bar. They don't walk into a bar, but they do a big study. More than 6,000 kids, junior athletes, 51 different studies from 2009 through to 2022. They're looking at all of these, looking at these kids that get selected for talent promotion program acceleration. And what they find, unsurprisingly, is that if you get your kids into one of these accelerated programs, the kids get better support, they get better facilities, they get more opportunities.
And they do really well.
Of course they do. They get more opportunities to practice. Like they're in there and they're doing it. So their confidence goes up and they feel really good about life. But here's what's fascinating about what this study shows. Well, it's not one study, it's 51 studies and all of the various effect sizes in there. They find that the earlier you start your children in a talent promotion program, the earlier you try to accelerate your kids, the worse it goes. And that's for both individuals and for teams worldwide. Doesn't matter what country they looked at. Worldwide, individuals, teams, males, females. The earlier your kids start in a talent promotion program, the worse it goes on average. I mean, there are obviously some early starters who still streak ahead and do really, really well. Don't get me wrong. But on average, huge attrition. Get this, between 25 and 55% of kids drop out on an annual basis. And then they refill the funnel with a whole bunch of new kids that they think might go really well. 25 to 55% drop out. You know why? Growth spurts, puberty. There's age selection effects. That's a really big thing, right? The eldest kids, they streak ahead, and so everyone thinks that they're gifted, but it's not. It's just that they're more mature or they've had more opportunities early in life.
More than that, though, they haven't had to fight for time with mum.
Right.
You talk about natural selection. These kids have had you completely to themselves.
So I wasn't actually talking about birth order, but you are right, which is why I let you finish the point. But rather just the eldest kids in each cohort as well. Even if they're second or third or fourth kids in a family, the fact that they're older means that they're more mature, they're taller, or they're faster, or they're better at regulating their emotions or following instructions. So eldest kids, both from an investment on the parent's perspective and also simply by being bigger and older than all the other kids in that cohort, they do better.
I'd really love them to do a study to see these children who do well in these early promotional programs and their happiness levels. Because my experience as I've watched kids who have specialised very early on, they don't have any balance in their lives. Everything is about putting blinders on to the life outside and just focusing and honing in on that one skill set that's going to put them above the rest. And in most cases, there's just a deep sadness. I see it.
So I'm not aware of any studies that exist that have looked specifically at that. It's a fascinating research question. What I can tell you, though, is that there's really interesting research by a guy called Bob Vallerand, and he's looked at this thing called harmonious passion and obsessive passion. He's not looking at adolescence. He's looking at, college-age student and up, right? So 18 and up, basically, if you're an adult. And what he finds is that when people are doing something in a harmonious way with the rest of their life and with their values, they're passionate about something and it works in well for them, and they're doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it because it's integrated into who they are. Those are the people who get tremendous well-being gains from doing that activity.
And you see that in the kids who are driven by a passion as opposed to a need to excel in an area.
Right, and that need's probably a good word, because the alternative is what he calls obsessive passion. And obsessive passion is, I'm doing it because I have to, I'm doing it because I have to, I want to prove, I want to maintain
this is
my
how I get
status.
This is how I get status, or this is how I get noticed by mum and dad. This is where I get my attention. You can really see it.
That reminds me of another study. I know that, again, today it's not a doctor's desk, but this stuff really...
You keep saying that.
It matters so much for the way we're driving our kids and trying to help them to achieve excellence, right? This conversation about kids fulfilling their potential. There was a study done by a mate of mine, Chris Nemick, at the University of Rochester. He looked at people who were going through university and then what happened following university. And what he looked at specifically was the goals that they were setting for the rest of their lives while they were at university. Did they have harmonious, intrinsic goals? Or do they have extrinsic goals? I want to look like this. I want to attain that.
I want to earn this much money.
Precisely. And what he found was that the well-being levels of the people who had these intrinsic goals, like I'm here to learn, I'm here to grow, I'm here to make a contribution, I'm here to develop relationships, I love building competence, I'm doing this because I love it, they had much greater levels of well-being, significantly higher levels of well-being than those young people who said, I want the car, I want the house, I want the salary, I want the career, I want to be at one of the big financial firms or whatever it was. It's not that they were unhappy, it's just that they didn't experience the same well-being benefits. All of that is to say, in response to your question, if we push our kids into these early talent promotion programs at a young age, quite often they're doing it, well, they're going to be excited about it when they're young because they're doing really well. We've even watched this with one of our nephews who is about to, he's on the cusp of becoming a first grade rugby league player. He was an absolute superstar in rugby league right through his childhood and adolescent years. But the further you go, the harder it gets. And by the time he was in his mid to late teens and everyone else had caught up, he's still an exemplary, exceptional player. But he's had to work far, far, far harder at it as a young adult than he did as a kid. And one of the things that I think's been the best for him is it's not his only outlet. He's done a university degree and he's got a really well-balanced life outside of the game. He's playing the game because he loves it, not because he feels like he has to prove something to people. So I guess that's kind of the real take-home message. In the words of these authors, they were looking at the opportunity cost, the time involved, the injuries that kids have, the burnout that comes. They made a couple of points, and I want to read these exact words because I thought they were so powerful. They said, consistent across different populations, early talent promotion program involvement is positively correlated with short-term junior performance, but is negatively correlated with long-term senior performance.
When I think back to all of the conversations I had with Chanel's teachers in those first few years, the acknowledgement was she was leaps and bounds ahead of the average kid. But across the board, their experience was sooner or later, the other kids were going to catch up. She wasn't a superstar. She had just been able to experience one-on-one time with me, which gave her an advantage. It wasn't actually academic advantage as much as it was relationship advantage.
Yeah, streaking ahead and staying there is not the norm. It just isn't. If you've got a child who really does, who really is, that's where we start to talk about the whole gifted stuff, and that's not the purpose of this podcast. Most of all, though, here's what I'd say to wrap up. Help your kids if they really like something, get them to practice lots. Make sure they've got good support.
I don't even think that. If your kid is genuinely passionate about something, you don't need to tell them to sit down at the piano and practice for 30 minutes every day. They do it because they love it. And I think that so many relationships in the home are challenged because mum or dad decides that you're really good at this and I'm going to make you do it.
Yeah, I had a conversation with someone at a school maybe a few months ago who had an 8-year-old who was performing in their chosen activity at a national level, 8 years old.
Wow.
National level. But one of the parents was literally saying, if you don't do X, we're going to pull you out of that activity. So really, really unhelpful.
Yeah.
Really unfair because we've got a kid who's just excelling. Let that child do that stuff. What I was going to say more than anything, though, is get the kids doing lots of things. The standard path to excellence in any field in the early days is streaking ahead. But once you get into your 20s and your 30s and your 40s, if we move the sport analogy into other aspects of life, it seems that having a wide range and a wonderful breadth of experience is much more likely to point you to learning the skills that are necessary to flourish and thrive later in life.
Over the years, we've had lots of conversations with our kids about the fact that there is no wasted knowledge that we acquire. We can have so many varied experiences and think that because we no longer want to go down that particular specialty or that road, that we've wasted all of this time and energy. And yet, as we go throughout life, we experience line upon line, precept upon precept, adding to the things that we've learned previously, and they actually round us out to be better individuals.
Here a little, there a little, and it builds us. We will link to that study in the show notes for people who are interested in it. The podcast has been produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. I feel really terrible saying for more information, visit happyfamilies.com.au, but that's what I'm going to say.